Welcome to the first ever epic Last Dance Saloon video. May your stay be as beautiful as you are. Because this is YouTube, the first section of the epic video is going to be about me. I know that's not you, but that is me. When it says you, it means me. In the title, when you upload a YouTube video, it means it's going to be about you, which would be me if you were you, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's get on with things. Body modification seems to be all the rage at the moment. Every time you go online and read the news or watch some other YouTubers having a waffle about something, you know, and body modification seems to be something that a lot of people have a very strong opinion about. Well, I mean, I was just reading today a lady's just given birth to a child after the very first womb transplant. And that's quite a novel and exciting way that society is progressing. Meanwhile, at the same time, there's another news article about a trans pool player who is suing her pool organisation because they don't want her to compete in the ladies' events. And that's just sort of how our society is trying to grapple with this whole concept of body modification, which has been going on progressively, you know, probably since the beginning of time. All the way back to, you know, just chopping somebody's leg off so they don't get the plague or whatever it is that chopping legs off prevented, gangrene or whatever, you know. So it's quite a daunting topic to, you know, decide whether you're the kind of person who yourself wants to partake in any body modification, and what are the social and moral implications of that. Where we used to see the most controversy, you know, before
the trans issue sort of started dominating the scene,
was that of plastic surgery. There was a time a while back when the concept of plastic surgery was something to be looked down on. If somebody had some plastic surgery, it was a bit of a laugh, a bit of a joke, you know, with the fake boobs and all that kind of thing, and the tummy tucks and the old, you know, liftings. And these cheekbones, it's sort of like the facial version of saggy tits. It's just an unavoidable part of life. And just like with saggy tits, you can get it done if you want to. But then I always think, because I'm quite old school and I come from I suppose a social history of mocking people that bother to try and look younger when they're older, I've sort of have this natural worldview that I spent all my life trying to get old. Now I'm old, why would I want to be young? It's just going backwards, you know. It's time to look distinguished. Don't know, no, yeah. No, even if you get it done, it'll just start re-sagging again, you know. So yeah, getting back on track. What I've been interested in over the last few years, now that generally speaking, plastic surgery has come on in leaps and bounds, and there's a lot of confidence now you can have when you find the right surgeon to have, you know, a procedure you can feel confident with. Medical, you know, small prints that, you know, things can go wrong, anything can happen. You sure you want to do this?
Because when things go wrong, they tend to go very, very wrong. You know, I don't really want to experience that kind of way.
However, the bane of my life has always just been moles.
And I don't mean the fellas in the garden that dig little holes and make little mounds that some people turn into mountains.
I'm talking about skin blemish moles. And moles come in many different forms. But when they're just like these round things, dome-shaped things, or pointing out things or whatever, and they're in the wrong place, you know, that's when it's awkward, isn't it? Like, you got a mole just like sticking out your nose like this, dangling away. That'd be really irritating, wouldn't it? That's different to like if you just had a brown patch on your neck or something. When I was younger, and I had about 2 or 3 moles that I thought I don't like that there. It's really irritating. I've got one on my butt cheek. It's like, oh shit. And you like scratch on the mole and it's like, you know, you're like pulling it off and it's like, oh shit. And, you know, it'll start bleeding or whatever. And that's one of my irritating moles that, you know, it'd be nice to get rid of one day. But of course, a mole like that is cosmetic. You wouldn't get it done on the NHS, and if you are, then you're ripping off taxpayers, basically. Because you can argue about the psychological impacts of having an annoying mole on your butt, and you could probably make a case of that. If you wanted to kick up enough of a stink, but essentially deep down, you know, that's just like, it's a cosmetic thing. So you got to get it done privately. And having one mole removed isn't actually that cheap. You know, it costs a few £100. You know, you got to think, is a mole on my butt cheek worth a few £100? And I don't have to look at it. It's annoying sometimes. It gets caught on something, or whatever, you know. But it's never been annoying enough to be worth a few £100. But a couple of years ago, I finally took the plunge and did pay a few £100 to have a dome mole removed from my forehead, which used to sit right there. And I mean, my parting's on this side, so even though I have hair that like covers my forehead, it was like right in the window, you know. I don't know why I have my parting this side. It's always been that side. I don't know if I have this hairstyle subconsciously because I've always hated that mole. But then if that was the case, then why is the parting on that side and not that side? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it was a practical joke by my first ever hairdresser, you know. Oh, let's give you a parting. I don't know, who knows. Anyway, as you get older, the annoying thing about moles is they start growing, and you don't know if it's cancerous or if it's just a mole growing, because it can happen in both circumstances. A growing mole can be a sign of cancer, but a growing mole is also a sign of just you're getting old. So this thing was sort of like getting bigger as I got older, and I'd finally had enough of it. So I went for the chop, and I forked out a few £100, womped it off, and it was gone. It's like it was never there, which is awesome. And, you know, I've been extremely happy ever since. I've kind of felt like a new person, I suppose, in a very small and very sort of detailed way. So now that I've found myself a surgeon I can be even more confident with, I mean, I've let them have a scrape at my face, for heaven's sakes, I can now get rid of a mole that has been probably the most annoying of all. And how do I put this politely? I mean, what? You want me to draw you a picture? It used to be a flat mole, totally innocuous, adds a bit of interest to something that's utterly boring, you know. But as I'm getting older, it started growing into a dome mole. I've been wanting to get rid of that, as you can imagine, for quite a long time. And now I got rid of it. And again, you know, I feel freer. I've been freed from a burden. And it's a very minor detail, and it's not really something you could quantify, but it was just very important to me. Should it even be on the NHS? No, probably not.
Got to draw the line somewhere, and you can't just everybody queuing up, you know, for every year for the latest mole that's gone a bit wonky, and some people get obsessed. They've been there every week getting every little mole picked out, all on our money. So no, that can't really work. It's got to be private, really.
But it is undeniable that it has a positive effect. So this one, a few £100, I'd say that was value for money. The one on my D, I would say that was worth a few £100, value for money. The one on my butt cheek, that's when I then, you know, I'm classing it like a luxury item if I go for the one on my butt cheek. Whereas the one on my D and the one on my forehead, I don't class it as luxury, I class it as crucial. And it's this kind of very nuanced, careful definitions that I think are very important in life. And you've got to know where to draw the line to have like a balanced approach to your own, you know, mentality, your ability to stay on an even keel mentally with how you appreciate your own appearance, you know, and not get depressed about something, but not be worried if there is something there that you want to get rid of, and it would affect your psychology to get rid of. Go get rid of it. I think this probably works for all forms of body modification, really. It's just how obsessed you want to get with it. Some people, and in this case, it does seem to be more peculiar to the ladies than the blokes. Some ladies get really intently into the whole body modification thing. And, you know, the fake boobs, the fake lips, the nose jobs, and the cheeks, and the crow's feet, and everything. And they do it to such an extreme that they look beautiful, but they look beautiful in a sort of manufactured way. I don't know, I think that's a bit much. I think you've just got to decide what is the...
If you're uncomfortable with how you look, you've got to decide, maybe it's that one thing, little thing, or what it is. You shouldn't be trying to look youthful. You should just be trying, because that's like you're fighting against an impossible wall. And by trying to look youthful, you're going down a path of non-stop,
forever treatments, you know, because you're not going to stop getting old. You've just got to kind of figure out a way to accept stuff. Don't be extreme about it, you know what I mean? Don't. It's not something that should be obsessed about. That's not how it's beneficial. Plastic surgery, body modification, thumbs up. I think that's humanity progressing in the right direction. So a few years ago, my dad suddenly started having problems eating things. It started off quite slowly, in that we'd be having a meal and he'd sort of like reject the broccoli and say, "Oh no, I don't want that. That upsets my stomach," and so the broccoli would be removed, and they'd get on with the meal and be like, "Broccoli, okay, no more broccoli." And then, you know, a few months' time, we'd discover that he's now rejecting fish, or non-white fish.
most commonly it'd be salmon, you know. And so be it having a meal of salmon, off goes the salmon, and future plans, you know, don't do the salmon. And
you know, this went on, month after month, more and more food started getting excluded. And these are all particularly foods that he particularly liked. You know, so it was very unusual in that respect. And eventually he was just eating potatoes.
Pretty much whenever we went out, he'd have the, you know, baked potato, beans, cheese, and not any other kind, just always that one, you know. He'd always be very disappointed if they didn't have baked potato, beans and cheese on the menu. And, you know, meals became more and more potato orientated, basically, and that's not particularly exciting. I mean, it's not bad. It's potatoes are nice. I like potatoes. I think most people like potatoes. But, you know, every night, you know, that takes a certain kind of stamina to enjoy
Having the same meal every night. But anyway, he felt that this wasn't upsetting his stomach like all the other gradual things were. And eventually it was just sort of... you know, nothing was staying in, you know, and
eventually we got him down to the doctors. We finally persuaded him that maybe something should be looked at, you know.
So yeah, he went to the doctors at long last. And now I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's just something peculiar to my parents, but they don't like going to the doctors. If they have anything wrong with them, they're determined in every regard to try and not go to the doctors and work it out through their system naturally. I don't know what it is.
Whether going to the doctors is some kind of defeat, or whether it's too much hassle, or whether it's just, you know, fear that it might be something more serious.
But getting anyone in this state of mind to go to the doctors is an achievement in itself. It's a relief that he's at last getting looked at. So anyway, he went to the doctors.
And they prodded and poked and did some experiments and shoved things in and pulled things out. And, you know, sent all the bits and pieces to the labs, you know, samples and what have you.
All the gory details that are, you know, probably good examples of why he doesn't like going to the doctors, you know. It's all very intrusive and all that kind of thing. And anyway, we sat and bated breath and waited for the results. And in the due course of time, the results came back. And the results came back that they felt that they'd found cancer. And of course, this is the fear that was obviously preventing him from going to the doctors. It's the kind of news you did not want to hear. It's what every person on the planet dreads, the big C. He's got the misery of the struggling with foods, while at the same time having the knowledge that he has cancer. So that made him even more morose. It sort of like had a more depressing effect. Thankfully, cancer is one of the things where things have been getting better in the medical world. We are making progress there, in leaps and bounds, in fact. You know, it's one of the... It's probably the most contributed form of charity in the world, and that money has been put to good use. It hasn't all been frittered away. People are making advancements in cancer care that people could only dream of decades ago. The programme he was put on was the BCG programme. That's where they pump some kind of chemical, an acidic chemical, into the organ that was causing the problems. This chemical, like, strips the lining of the organ, the internal lining of the organ, which is where his little cancery polyps were, as it were. And it's an extremely painful process. Painful and unpleasant. I suppose you could sort of say it is a form of torture even. It's like, you know, giving somebody pain deliberately. But of course in this particular instance it is for their hopeful benefit. The success rate of BCG isn't 100%. The whole thing of how early you catch the progress of your cancer and whether your body can even stand up to the BCGs, you know.
and lots of other factors that, you know, don't even make this a guaranteed process. And every few weeks you've got to go in and in goes all the acid. And then he has about 2 or 3 days of laying in bed in sort of like a state of recovering agony. And then he has a few days of proper recovery and then a couple of weeks of relative normality before going back to the hospital. All over again, time and time again.
And each episode, you know, was making him more and more miserable. Is the cure worse than the disease itself, you know? Is one of these episodes going to be too much for him to cope with? You know, his heart just gives away and gives up the ghost, or his motivation to go on gives up, you know. And it's quite a traumatic process. You don't want to go through, really. It's not what you hope for in life. The extent to which it's worth going through, you can only know after it's finished, whether it's having any positive effect. So after many months of going through all of this, another test takes place to find out how it's all progressing. And the test comes back that, you know, all good. Things do look like they're improving, which is great. That's exactly what you want to hear. But they're not improving enough that the BCG has to stop. An island of respite in a sea of
continuous situation, because he still has to go back in a few more months' time to have another few doses just to,
you know, make sure it's properly gone. He goes back and has it all done. A few more weeks, and he goes back in again to test again whether it's having any effect. And just the other day, the results come back, and they say that he's clear. The cancer has been conquered. Isn't that fantastic news? How about that? He still has to go in for more potential BCGs, but like the gap now is like months away instead of, you know, just weeks or whatever. It's like magic. All the moroseness just goes away. And on top of that, he's now eating again normally. And because he's had like 2-3 years of not eating an awful lot of things, there's just a wonderful joy in taking pleasures from the more normal aspects of life that people take for granted every day, of just eating a variety of foodstuffs. It reinforces the belief that the NHS is indeed a good system. If there wasn't an NHS and you had to pay for medical through insurance or, you know, individual payment at the time, then the desire not to go and see the doctor in the first place would have been so much larger. The determination to leave it later and later and later would have been greater and greater and greater. It's one of those things that you don't know what you've got until it's gone, really, and it does take situations like this to make you appreciate that. I noticed in the news today that Russell Brand, the famous celebrity and expat to America, has finally been charged with one charge of rape. And he's got some other lesser charges also to defend, about 5 of them, I think, lesser charges. And he's going to be coming back to England to defend himself.
Hello. Firstly, thank you for these incredible and overwhelming messages of support.
We're very fortunate in a way to live in a time where there's so little trust in the British government.
We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon to be used against people, institutions, and sometimes entire nations that will not accept and tolerate levels of corruption that are unprecedented. I'm speaking particularly to those of you that are watching this in the UK. How do you feel about your legal system right now? How do you feel about some of the high-profile cases that are not being pursued and prosecuted? How do you feel that the Southport murders were handled? How do you feel about the government of Keir Starmer? Now, that's just sort of general context.
Me, I've always told you guys that when I was young and single, before I had my wife and
Family, with just that shot over there, my beautiful children. I was a fool, man. I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord.
I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes. I want to thank all of you for your continuing
Support. I want to let you know that our show will be on Rumble on Monday. Thanks for your support there.
And of course, I'm now going to have the opportunity to defend these charges in court, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. In the meantime, you lot, stay free, and we will be continuing to discuss this matter.
Praise the Lord.
Now, I can't really comment on this. I don't know what's happened. Obviously going to be something that can only really be debated in court. I can't really have an opinion on who's right and who's wrong at this point in time. I think anybody who has an opinion on who's right and who's wrong in this at this particular time is probably just whether you like Russell Brand or whether you like the person who's accusing him. The historical precedent of Russell Brand's famously numerous sexual encounters suggests that statistically the probability is that he's more likely to be well, not innocent, I suppose. It's a very difficult legal terminology, the term innocent, you know, it's all about the technicalities. But when he says that he believes that all of his encounters are always consensual, and then this rape allegation seems to be a borderline one where both parties were really intoxicated, and it seems like the other party knew who he was and what his reputation was and all that kind of thing. But of course technicalities are technicalities, and what it brought to my mind was an idea that I've had for, you know, a couple of years now. And it's quite a far out idea, you know, like most new ideas are, you know. Would it work? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. I haven't given it a lot of thought to the point where I'm so enamoured with the idea that I'm going to dedicate my life to bringing it into force. But it's an idea that I think possibly could benefit society, particularly in cases like this, where you've got somebody who's a bit of a slag, high number count, you know, on their sexual activity historical record, and you've got somebody who's in their company in a state of social excitement, as it were, and for whatever reasons sexual activity has occurred. My idea is to have a sort of like a consent app. The two people would have the app on their phone, and when they first meet, in whatever circumstances, and whenever both parties feel it's the right time, they can send a consent agreement between the two on the app. It's not a consent to sex necessarily. You can have different grades of consent, like person A thinks person B is good looking, so they can send them a request, you know, I think you're a bit fit, fancy a snog sometime. And so their consent agreement is limited to snogging at this point in time. And the other person, they can read it and go, I don't know, might be into a snog. On the other hand, no, I'm not really into it. And they, you know, they can reply on their app, you know, what their response is. But the thing about this app, possibly what makes it unworkable, I don't know, is that it'd all be fully public. Anybody who has the app can look up anybody and see what their sexual history, and not just sexual history, but relationship, friendliness and blah, blah, blah. Whatever you categorise, it's difficult to categorise what is sex nowadays because, as I say, Russell Brand's got these 5 other lesser charges that are related to sex, but you know, you can get done for groping and I don't know. I haven't had sex with anyone for 15 years. I've lost track of what is and isn't legal anymore, you know, it no longer concerns me. But anyway, you know what I mean, it's like broadening definitions and all that. And anyway, because it's all public, it's sort of like a trust pilot for sexual activity and relationship activity and what have you. When you spot somebody, you know, and you know they're on the app, you can just look at their history. So before you even say your first post, hey, fancy a snog sometime, you can have a look through their history and find out, you know, whether they're, from other experiences, whether they're like the kind of person that you want to necessarily have a snog. So if you're like looking through and it's like, you know, they haven't had much activity, you know, you might feel your odds are higher. But if you look through and they've had like thousands of, you know, activities like with Russell Brand or whatever, you know, you can think like, oh, he's a bit of a slag, you know, I might catch something, whatever, you know, and that might like put you on the starter. And Russell Brand, you know, he wouldn't have been tempted to, you know, even go for the first snog with this other person because there's been no initial agreement in the first place. And with an app like that, you could do it while off your face, you know, it's very simple and it's the kind of thing you can put into your sort of like automated routines so that even when you're like, you know, it's something you can figure out. So that, you know, then when rape cases come up, having no agreements on the app is a good indicator that somebody wasn't in agreement. But the best thing about it, I think, is that you could have reviews, you know, like you do for everything else in the world, you know, products, movies, books, whatever. After people have engaged in any kind of sexual activity, be it anything from a fondle or a snog all the way up to, I don't know, you know, let your imagination run wild, really, you know. They can, you know, put a review, you know, like we had a bit of a slap and tickle behind the hedge after a night at the pub, and I found it to be a very pleasurable experience. Or I was, you know, 5 stars, you know, or 4 stars, you know, shame about the halitosis, you know what I mean, something like that, you know. And conversely, you know, somebody's had a negative experience, you know, they could put, you know, it's like, oh, it was horrible, really, he didn't really know what to grab, he was, you know, he was too off his face to do anything. After I smelled the halitosis, you know, I decided that wasn't going to be, you know, it's not going to happen, really, I'm snogging him. He took that badly, you know, and he started, like, pulling at me, and, you know, I had to like, scream in his face to get rid of him, you know, and 1 star, you know, there's all up there for everybody to see, you know. So, you know, next time they're down the horse and feathers, you know, and people look, you know, somebody up there who thinks he's a bit hot, you know, his face might have a chance here, you know, oh dear, oh no, he's you know, you go up to the bar, you know, smell the breath, yeah, halitosis is still there, yeah, that's a pretty accurate review. And so in the case of sort of like Russell Brand, you know, you can have these thousands of reviews and he's like 99% happy because like we've had open season on Russell Brand for over a year now, whatever it is. And, you know, everybody who's had a negative experience has been allowed to phone the cops and tell them all about it. And he's had thousands of customers, as it were. And there's a very small number of people that have complained. I noticed in the reports, you know, they're still asking people to come forward, you know, it's sort of like, because I think they know that, like, he's got 1,000 happy customers and just a couple of unhappy customers, which, although, you know, technically it doesn't matter in a legal case, for the wider public and particularly the circumstances of the one instance that's, you know, been a rape, accused rape or whatever, it's when they're both intoxicated. So that it's not a really easy sell to the public that, you know, this guy's a rapist, you know, let's all call him a rapist, you know, if he gets done for it, you know, it's a bit, you know, it's a bit difficult really. So they're begging people to come forward so that they can be more serious about how serious it possibly could be. But if we had this app with all the reviews and the initial connections and the toing and froing of what kind of things people are getting up to. Fancy a snog? Yeah, I fancy a snog. They meet. Oh no! Negative review. We agreed to a snog and he tried to stick his dick in me, I'm not having that. Shouted at him. Ended there. 1-star review. And then if that bloke goes to court, because he's dragged somebody behind a hedge and got violent, there's that historical record there. That helps, doesn't it, So you say, well, people won't use it because they don't want a historical record. Well, that's the thing, it's like most things, it's like, well, what are you trying to hide then? Again, you go on there and you stick it, and somebody's got no reviews at all because they're paranoid, and you think, why are you paranoid? A bit soft, maybe I won't ask them for a snog, And so, this can start from a very young age. Obviously, youth is, a highly controversial topic, especially with social media. So again, that's another thing I don't know how it would work, but where do you make the cut-off point where you like the child version and the adult version? And you can get an idea of what somebody's like before you even engage in any of these processes. It would work, I think, in that it would add a sort of element of peer pressure to the whole nature of having sex, which is what religion is all about. Religion is all about engaging in any form of sexual activity is a hideous sin to like the extremist religions, and you should only ever do it when you're trying to pump out a baby. It's like, fine, yeah, that's in its extremity, but it doesn't always work, does it? I mean, let's face it. And even people who live that lifestyle, they could still be on the app and you could have lovers, spending their whole life just sending each other nice messages and reinforcing how much they love each other, Other people who are like, oh, they are in a happy marriage, aren't they? Well, that does work. So even from that point of view, you could use it as a promotion for extremist religion as well. I mean, it's no barrier to its potential, showing people that people do actually stick around together if they, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so, with this sort of like age thing, when it should start and when it should finish, but, it would help young people know that there's some kind of, not rules, but social conventions around sex. For a young person, it probably wouldn't even be sex. It would very much be just the snogging, and you show me yours, I'll show you mine, and all that nonsense, We're trying to be an open society now, so parents could look in on it. Who's my kid snogging today, and keeping a check on them. But then kids won't use it if their parents are looking at it. But that's the whole thing, isn't it? Once something's sort of like normalised and part of society, then that adds to the peer pressure to make sure that people are going about their business as society would prefer them to go about their business. The problem of putting everything in the open, I mean, there is loads of flaws to this system, obviously. I mean, trolls and blah, 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 blah. But from a trying to solve a problem point of view, I think that's kind of what society needs, really. Because when a complete slag meets an immovable object, boom, it's like so many people grow up and get to adulthood, and we're having problems at the moment with people not knowing, how people should relate to each other, without venturing into extremities. The sort of gradual evolution of learning from a young age to use an app that stabilises the concept of consent, I think would, I think that would be a good idea. It might be ludicrous. I haven't thought of the negatives because I think it's a good idea. But there is obviously possibly lots of negatives that might make it not work. Anyway, best of luck to Russell Brand, or / if you're on the other side, best of luck to the lady, whoever's in the right. We shall wait and see, I suppose. Something that I find concerning in the modern political climate is the fact that liberals are sort of like being associated with things that are nothing to do with liberals. Generally speaking, I consider myself a liberal. However, when I see any kind of discussion or comment about liberals, it's from a perspective of wishy-washy or weakness or mockery. You get this with all political parties and all political institutions, but the word liberal as a belief structure isn't really a political party. And it's a bit of a shame that the word liberal has been mixed up with political parties, because liberalism as a concept is extremely important. It's something that has always existed and, generally speaking, has always been a positive in everybody's lives, even the authoritarians. I suppose in this video I'm going to say what is a liberal, why liberals are so important, where people are probably misunderstanding the concept of liberalism, and how I think it's actually quite dangerous for the progression of humanity. Oh, there's that word progression again, which has also been co-opted, and is a very important word that shouldn't be co-opted, but such is the nature of politics. People latch onto things and drive them into the ground until there's nothing left but dust. You can't use the word anymore because it's got so many connotations. How can they be represented in politics without being a political party? Why we vote and keep getting the same thing? And generally sort of like try and highlight some questions that a lot of people think about the meaning of life. I know it's quite a tough topic to handle on just a light-hearted YouTube video, but we're going to go for it. We're going to delve into the human soul and discover why authoritarians need liberals and why liberals need authoritarians and how they work together to make everybody's life progressively better. So to describe what a liberal is actually very easy. There is just one defining trait which governs everything that a liberal is or stands by as a principle. And that is leniency. Whatever the topic, the liberal will normally come down on the more lenient side of what an authoritarian says is what has to be. And throughout history, we have always been ruled by authoritarians. We'll come to authoritarians later. But the liberal is always the one that says, wait a minute, I don't think they should have their head chopped off for that. I think that's over-egging the pudding a bit. There's a billion different ways you can punish somebody in this world, and chopping the head off just seems a little bit extreme. You think that's a bit barbaric. And the authoritarian, you know, the book says, you know, for what they've done, head chopping. So that's what we're going to do. And life isn't by the book necessarily. Let's say it's a head chopping offence to pick your nose in public. There are lots of weird rules in the world. It's not impossible to imagine a society that has decided one day by their, you know, typically mad authoritarian overlord that picking your nose in public is now a capital offence, where the punishment is head removal. So, you know, being law-abiding citizens, we all then abide this rule. Every time we're out, we get a tickle. Like, oh, no, don't do it. And, you know, some poor fella, you know, thought they were in, thought they were in a corner, and everybody was looking, and, you know, somebody walks in, oh, picked your nose. And because they're a law-abiding citizen, they now witness you picking your nose, and if they don't tell the police, they're now an accessory, and so, by the book. So, you know, cops are cool, blokes had it, you know, off to jail, picking his nose on telly, horrible man picks his nose, up with his head. And, you know, we can debate the rights and wrongs of that. But where the issue then arises, which is what really gets people's goats up, is the problem being injustice. In that, okay, you can have your rule about nose picking, we don't mind, but that bloke clearly didn't pick his nose. Not that bloke I just mentioned, but another bloke who was wandering about and a bee came and sat on his nose. Any human being who has a bee sat on their nose, especially if they've got a bee phobia, oh shit, you know. And another passerby from a slightly different angle that didn't catch the bee has seen this bloke, you know, they think they picked their nose. And this other person, they're paranoid now because they don't want to be an accessory, you know. So they call the police. I think I've seen somebody pick their nose. Here come the cops, you know. I'm sorry, sir, you know, we've had somebody say you picked your nose. And the bloke's like, no, there was a bee. It's like, oh, no. And the cops are like, well, that's just your story, mate. We've got a witness. And the witness comes along and, you know, yeah, it definitely looked like a nose pick to me. I didn't see any bees at all. You know, the bees down the back and they're over there. And there we go. The cops, you know, have to do their duty. They've got, you know, can you prove there was a bee on your nose? I wasn't particularly prepared to be proving I had a bee on my nose at that particular time. And there we go. Off he goes in the cuffs into jail. He comes to court. head chops off. And then a few days later, you know, an owner of a cafe over the road just got back from holiday or whatever. He spent a year in Australia. You know, he's been doing well recently, and he fancied a bit of a break, so he's closed up shop and gone to Australia, and you know, he's come back and reopened again and had a bit of a refurb while he was away. You know, that was part of it. You know, take the opportunity to refurb the establishment, and he gets back and you know, he hears about this story and he thinks, oh, that was, you know, that was outside my shop. I wonder if I've got that on camera. And he looks through his CCTV. Oh my God, the camera picks up the bee. You know, releases it, goes viral. Everybody's like, what the? Massive incarriage of justice. Bloke's had his head chopped off because he had a bee land on his nose. It's irrational, it's madness. We can't go on just chopping people's heads off on the hearsay of random people saying they've picked their nose in public, you know what I mean? And that's where the liberal comes in, you see. It's like, well, we did try to tell you, you know, it's not ideal to have any kind of final punishment like that, because they will always exist in the human condition. The nuance, an authoritarian by default cannot conceptualise, because in order to conceptualise the nuance, they can't have the total authority. They can't put in the book, head chopped off unless a bee lands on the nose. And then have 5 million different nuance subsections of when you can actually pick your nose. Every time somebody gets their head chopped off and it's found out that there's a different reason why their finger approached their nose at that particular time, you know, it's another subsection, billions and billions of subsections. At that point, it's like the authoritarian is just saving their face. They're doubling down and doubling down and doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. And the liberal is there as a human condition. The liberalness of the human condition is there to rationalise the authoritarian dictate. That makes sense to everybody. If the authoritarian is going a bit loopy, and by necessity an authoritarian has to go a bit loopy, the liberal exists as the counterbalance. And don't get me wrong here, the existence of liberal in our human condition does not invalidate authority. The liberal condition requires authority. It requires the authority to be authority for the liberal voice to be heard within that authority. In the case of the nose picking, if a liberal came to power and was put in the position of authority, that is automatically hypocritical, because the liberal wants a more lenient stance on the head chopping for the nose picking. So they can't stand there and be the leader of the authoritarian system while people's heads are being chopped off for nose picking. The liberal is forced to remove the rule of head chopping for nose picking. And now there can be any scale of reduction in the crime. Like, they could completely legalise nose picking, and nose picking in public would no longer be a crime. That would be an extreme, the other way, reversal of that rule. They could do that. Or they could just say, we're not going to chop people's heads off for nose picking anymore. It's just life imprisonment. 20 years plus, whatever the judge thinks. And that's a tiny little movement away from the extremity of a head removal. And between those gaps, that's all liberal. The authoritarian is just the head chopping. And generally speaking, most organisational authoritarian structures in history are mostly liberal, because the authority figure takes over a scenario that has existed prior. And the existence that existed prior was thousands of years of authoritarians being moderated by liberals. But the problem is, you see, once that liberal authoritarian, the liberal authority that has been brought into power to get rid of the crazy authoritarian of the day, once they've changed that rule to be more lenient on the nose picking, their job is done. And the problem is, a society needs authority to exist. Otherwise, what you have is chaos. And this goes back to the problem of humanity that has been identified readily throughout history, that our societies do tend to drift between chaos and authoritarianism. Because that's human nature. And human nature is the inherent human condition of either being liberal on a subject or authoritarian on a subject. And that difference is purely whether you want to be more strict or more lenient. You can extrapolate that to any scenario, be it a workplace, a school, the government, even just a group of friends. There will always be the authoritarian leader, as it were, with authoritarian ideas on how everybody else should behave. And everybody else is some version of liberal. Of course, they won't say that they're liberal. If that authority says, I hate liberals, and authoritarians generally do have to hate liberals, because they have to double down on all their rules. Otherwise, chaos ensues. So you have this constant struggle between those who aren't happy with the authority and the authority who's not happy with the people. But the people, they need that authority, because of course in chaos you don't want to walk out into the street and have somebody just chop off your head because they think that's a jolly good laugh. Basic common sense. I think we've known that for quite a few thousand years now. Similarly, we want the authoritarian to be aware that that's not how we want society. And the authoritarian is going to say, okay then, yeah, sounds like a good thing to me. I don't particularly, I must admit that's something I agree with. I don't want to walk down the street and have my head randomly removed. That's I can't exist in that kind of scenario, so I understand your point of view. The person who cuts the head off you randomly, they're the ones who are going to get punished in the most severe ways. So an agreement has been reached. The authoritarian is in agreement with the people that we as all do not want to live in a society where heads get randomly removed. Makes sense, right? But of course, it's not just heads removed. There's hundreds of thousands of different issues and complaints and policies that govern society and that people want and need. And there's a constant flow of authority stamping down in order to make the people happy to justify the authority that they need. So what the history of the world or civilization, groups of people with rules, is essentially a constant flow from the authoritarian, keeping the people happy so that the people are happy with the authoritarian. It's in their self-interest to stay the authority, so they want to keep the people happy. The people want the authoritarian to be happy so that they've got protection. It's all a big protection racket, by human nature. The history of civilization is just a constant flow between more lenient and more strict, more lenient and more strict. And any sane person naturally wants to be the authority. There's huge competition to be the authority. You get to, you know, being the authority, you can pretty much do what you want. It's magic land. The world is your oyster. So you have competing authorities. So when you look at a political system and you see 4 political parties, they are all the same thing. They are all authoritarians. None of them are liberal. They all want to have the power to tell you what to do by their own vision, because that enables them to do whatever they like and shape the world as they would like individually. And that is how it's always been. So where does the liberal fit into that? How do you vote for a liberal? Well, when authoritarian parties compete, so for example, political party A, they chop the heads off for nose picking. Political party B, life imprisonment for nose picking. But they chop heads off for tooth picking in public. You know, next party, they're against chopping heads off for tooth picking. That's just life imprisonment for them. And they're against nose picking. That, they want to legalise that. But they chop heads off for bum scratching. And then the other party, the fourth party, they think it's all nonsense. You know, they think nose picking is wrong, nose picking is all right. Tooth picking is fine, bum scratching, love that. No, decriminalise it all. But they're going to chop the heads off people who try to bring back nose scratching or tooth picking or bum scratching. So between the 4 parties, you kind of pick where they're liberal by comparison to what they object to from the other authoritarian, and then accept whatever their new authoritarian is. I mean, it sounds like a mess, doesn't it? And that's what it is. That's what life is. It's a complete mess. That's part of the chaos that I was talking about. Because if you had a political party that was just, I don't care what you do, fine with it all, then you get your head randomly chopped off when you're walking down the street. Essentially, with the 4 parties, they all appear liberal to each other, and they all appear authoritarian once they're in power and doing their thing. So whatever you do, you always have the authoritarian in control. The person in control will never be a full liberal. They will be an authoritarian who has some opinions which appear liberal in comparison to another authoritarian figure wanting their particular way of thinking to be zoned in on everybody. So what do you mean when you say you're a liberal? Well, societies are so vast, you know, millions of people, and politics generally, and any authoritarian structure, is so detached from the individual that an individual doesn't need to have an opinion on any of the parties. Approximately 30% of humanity just kind of tries to abide by the rules and will likely have opinions that many of the rules are either stupid or should be more lenient. And it's these 30% that get touted to by authoritarians, be on my side, no, be on my side, no, be on my side. It's this 30% that actually have a very difficult life. It's like hard mode, and by default, probably most people in prison are in there because they're sort of like a bit liberal-minded. And this sounds a bit weird because you can speak to somebody who's been in prison and they can appear like a complete mental psychopath on the very extreme ends of the scale. And on a lot of topics, they might be. But they've obviously decided by themselves that one particular rule from the authority doesn't apply to them. And they've decided to be liberal. So they've ended up in jail. And the whole thing is about humanity, again, is that, generally speaking, we all break laws, minor to major, everything in between. It's almost impossible to get through life without breaking some kind of rule or other. And it's very difficult for anybody to admit that they've broken a rule, because you know, the second you admit it, you know, the cops come round, oh, you've admitted to something, off you go. Let's take some famous examples. You know, Donald Trump, 1 minute he's breaking lots of rules, he's off to prison, the next minute he's not, he's the prez. And now he's the authority. And he's no longer broken rules because he's the authority. You know, you can argue that Donald Trump is an authoritarian and all his fans will tell you that liberals are scum and blah, 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 blah. But they don't mean liberals because Donald Trump is a liberal. Otherwise he wouldn't have broken rules. And they'll say, well, he didn't break rules. Yeah, I know, because he's the authority. You can say he didn't break them. Okay, right. Okay. So, you know, we have to accept that. That's what our obligation is now under the new regime. So, but you can't say, well, Donald Trump's a liberal. And he, you know, he used to be a Democrat, but that's a different topic because Democrats aren't really liberals. But anyway, they're another authority. Anyway, so, you know, but you can't, you know, if you try and communicate this kind of information, that's when the trolls rush in. The second you say, but, you know, well, Donald Trump's a liberal, they'll all rush, etc., etc. And, you know, to make sure that this is sort of like a neutral position that everybody can understand without raging and blowing their heads up and, you know, having fights about stuff. Bill Clinton, you know, he broke a rule. Well, according to Monica Lewinsky, anyway, you know. And there was lots of court cases then. And obviously Bill Clinton, you know, had a moment of liberalism. And liberalism is inherent in every single human. It just vanishes as soon as you're the authority. And you can't vote for liberalism because inherently liberalism is not authoritarian. You can only maintain a liberal perspective by being a person who chooses between authority. And everybody under that authority is a lawbreaker of some kind. They have chosen to be liberal on a law. Law books, massive, you'd be amazed. We all live in a constant denial that we are liberal inherently, because we have to, because the authoritarian demands that. So that's like the outward face that we have to present, is that we are not liberal. But internally, we are all liberal. So we've established we're all criminals, but we're all law-abiding citizens as part of our basic human condition. So how can this be construed in a way that correlates to the fact that this process has progressively made the world a better place for everybody in a general sense? Obviously, whatever today's grievances are will be tomorrow's better world once they're resolved. So don't get fixated on saying that the world isn't a better place and that the past was a better place at any point in the past, because it's mathematically impossible for that to be the case. Because century after century after century, moving into millennia after millennia after millennia, we've had authoritarians trying to please the people, who are in turn trying to please the authoritarians to create a more stable society that everybody can agree is pretty good. And each little adjustment along the way, every time one authoritarian either gets removed, pops his clogs, gets voted out, whatever the system is, liberalism occurs in that a new authority emerges and changes the rules, makes some things more lenient, other things more harsh. But in a way, they have to do it that still keeps all the people happy. Otherwise, they get the chop, or they get the idea. So, as the time progresses, each little shift, don't like this, like that, don't like this, don't like that, piece by piece, it gets slightly better, slightly better, slightly better. But you don't see it. You can't conceptualize it because you're living under an authority that by necessity has rules in place that you don't like, and there's a very high likelihood that it'll punish you for not liking those rules. But what you can't sense but has already happened is that lots of rules that you definitely wouldn't have liked have been wiped out by the evolution of civilization. I suppose by some kind of majority osmosis. We have to take on the battles of today in order to create the progress for tomorrow. But of course the word progress doesn't necessarily mean that one specific thing that one political party or their opposition think it means. And generally speaking, around the whole world, the number of people, for example, who have their head randomly chopped off when they're wandering about is much lower than it used to be in the past. That's the kind of thing that you can see progressively over the centuries and millenniums has reduced in society. You'd have to go to undiscovered tribes in jungles to get back to an authority where just having a little wander about could very well result in your head being chopped off, just for wandering about, because you're whatever the authority doesn't like that you've just randomly wandered into. Don't like that one. Liberal concepts tend to rise to the surface in political discourse predominantly when it becomes evident that the authority, or whatever that authority is, feels like it's regressing to a time when you could just get your head chopped off for wandering down the road. Some recent examples that might sort of like might make it easier to resonate. It's sort of like when communism was very popular as a political concept, and some countries started instigating, communism as their basis for authority. People were getting their heads chopped off or disposed of in other ways for having alternate beliefs, for example. And the whole alternate beliefs thing is a very hot topic for authoritarians, The more communism found itself diving into this desperation well of head removals, the more the people gradually moved away from it, started backing off. And this happens very consistently with all authoritarian structures, and the longer that the same principle stays in authority, particularly the same individual, over time, more and more heads get chopped off. And the more that the heads get chopped off, the more people down below know who, friends with them, friends, relation, creating more and more, you're attacking more and more cells within your organism. You're chopping off more of your own limbs, you know what I mean? Eventually, there's just so much discontentment which can't be identified. An authoritarian can't chop off somebody's head for discontentment because they don't know who's discontent, because everybody's got the face on. Everybody's got the law-abiding citizen face on, but inside they're all liberal. So the authoritarian starts lashing about, whacking everything. And then you get the injustices, which make it worse. And eventually it becomes untenable, and that authority fades into existence, and a new authority takes its place. I hope this all makes sense. I probably said that a couple of times, but very, very complex subjects like this, it's too much, isn't it? It's like, to know too much is to know nothing. How does this help? It hasn't helped anything, has it? Because I've still got an authority and I've still got structure. You haven't told me whether I should be for or against this specific one rule. Yes, that's the thing about discussing the human condition in a political context, is that the human condition is nebulous. But the main thing, the main piece of understanding that you can get from this, from what I've been saying, if nothing else makes sense to you, if the concept isn't something you can grasp, if this all just sounds like random waffle to be ignored like all the other random wafflers, just take this one basic soundbite, as it were, and that's that when you're accepting an authority, i.e. somebody who's speaking to you with an opinion from a very basic level, you can instantly work out the extent to which they're an authoritarian and the extent to which they're liberal by whether they like to make punishments for crimes more severe, or whether they want to make punishment for crimes less severe. That's all you need to know. More severe, authoritarian. Less severe, liberal. And it doesn't matter what the subject matters are. Somebody might have a face on that they're liberal, but then you'll hear them say, I saw somebody picking their nose the other day. It's disgusting. I think they should get 20 years for that. And you think, oh, I thought they were a bit liberal. But it seems not. It seems their impulse when they see a crime is to automatically wish to promote severity of punishment. Whereas a liberal would see somebody pick their nose and think, ooh, well, he's done something a bit naughty. Let's think about the nuances of nose picking for a minute. Would I ever pick my nose? Could I pick my nose? If I pick my nose, you know what I mean? Has a bit of self-awareness, if you like. A video that piqued my interest recently was one that popped up in my recommendations from a journalist, broadcaster, sort of kind of person who frequents places like LBC and Talk Radio, if you know who they are. They're sort of, I suppose, the modern version of the shock jock kind of radio stations where they get highly animated about every topic under the sun, and but with a sort of political bias depending on who's presenting at that particular time, you know. Yeah, I sometimes watch these programmes. If a topic comes up that is of, you know, particular interest, they sort of like just appear in the recommendations as options. I think the most common one is Mr. O'Brien, but yeah, no, I'm not going to review one of his. You know, when I was younger, I used to listen to a lot of radio, and I think I was about 10 or 11. I phoned one up once, you know, to answer some kind of quiz question maybe, or give my thoughts about something. I can't really remember, but they sent me some records, and that was nice, you know. But yeah, so I sort of from a young age, and I know how these programs work, as it were, you know. So I don't really watch them very much or listen to them very much anymore, because sort of like you can only do so much before you figure out, you know, how they operate or whatever, and it all becomes a bit mundane, you know. Person phones up with opinion. You know, I think cows are too big nowadays. The cows used to be quite small when I was younger, and the presenter says, oh right, oh, really, have you got stats to back that up? And it's like, well, no, you know, it's just like, well, thank you very much for calling, bye. And then, you know, it's, you know, and then they say, oh, what a loony presenter, and then they can put the clip on, and, you know, I mean, not a loony presenter, what a loony phone caller, you know, and you can have your loony phone caller of the day or whatever on your clip. Anyway, so this bloke came up who I haven't seen before, but his YouTube history suggests it's sort of like he's worked for these companies, and you know, he sits there and does similar things in his videos. And I don't know if he does phone-ins or if he's one that just waffles his own opinion. I didn't get that into it, because this is like my first exposure to him. And it wasn't really the video itself, and it was more, you know, the reaction it got from me, because it's sort of like he managed to find something that's sort of like deep within my psyche, and it interested me, you know. And he was going on about how he wanted to declare open season on, I think it's some scout leaders in Swindon or something like that. I mean, the clip I'll show, if it's still up, you know, you can get all the details from that. In this particular instance, he wasn't reporting on somebody else. He was giving his own story, his own experience. And he was complaining that he's had a very negative experience when he was about 7 years old, because he went to a cub or scout camp. I think he said he was 7 at the time, something like that anyway. And they wanted him to get naked, you know, for the funsies. And not just him, you know, everybody. They were doing a big nude-a-thon. Apart from the scout leaders or whatever. This is his story. And you know, he himself was sort of like, he felt humiliated by it, and you know, it was sort of like looking back on it from the modern perspective. He's thinking like, were these scout leaders up to no good? In every way you can imagine, you know, as the modern concept of naked people, how people think about that nowadays, you know. And he wants to declare open season on these scout people on Swindon and have everybody tell him whether any of them have had any sexual experiences with these scout leaders. Was their desire to nudify everybody for a bit of fun one night? You know, did it have ulterior motives? What I took interest in is that he said he felt humiliated, and you know, I have an incident in my memory which is very similar. You know, I was at primary school, which in American I think is elementary school, possibly. Yeah, anyway, about 5 years old. So a couple of years before his incident in age relation terms, you know, I was about 5 years old. And anyway, everybody was getting naked, and I didn't want to. And you know, the teachers came over and said, you know, well, you've got to get naked, that's what we're doing, you know. And I was like, no, I don't want to, no. And just, I didn't want to do it. First, you know, it's the first experience of being asked to get naked in a situation that wasn't like family related, I suppose, home related, I don't know how you want to describe it, but like, you know, somebody else has said, come on, you've got to get naked. And yeah, I screamed the house down, or the school down, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, this went on, and I dragged it on, and more teachers came and sort of like, you know, get the dinner ladies in, you know. They didn't really know what to do with me, I suppose, because I was the only one doing that, and you know, I was the only one that found it, you know, a bit unusual. The problem was, you know, it was sort of like, we're trying to teach you how to swim, and in order to teach people how to swim, they've got to get their kit off and put their trunks on. And so all the other kids were like getting their kit off and putting their trunks on, and I was just standing there screaming, saying, oh, I don't want to do it. You know, it's a very memorable experience, and I can relate in that, yeah, it was sort of like, I suppose a sense of humiliation, I don't know. So eventually, yeah, they, I think somehow must have figured out a way for me to be secured. I think I remember them sort of like holding up lots and lots of towels, so effectively they'd created my own personal dressing room. You know, probably a sort of a bit like Oliver, you know, asking for more. It's like, they're like, what the fuck, you know, and but in this case, you know, rather than getting shouted at, they actually made an effort to like try and make me a private dressing room out of towels and what have you, you know. And I got in the trunks, and you know, I got in the water, and it's like, oh, I don't go in the water, and you know, oh, no, I don't want scary stuff, water and all that kind of thing, and you know, after that first day, you know, and getting used to it, and I think I was pretty much normal after that, and you know, I can enjoy swimming now. You know, it didn't take long to get into it, but the initial bit scary, you know. You realise, you know, in these swimming sessions, you know, some of the kids, the whole concept of getting naked was wonderful for them. They really enjoyed it. You know, some of them were like running around the entire school playing field waving their towel in the air, you know, you know, completely naked, because that was all great fun. And so, you know, I mean, most of them were just sort of like, I suppose what we class as normal. They just got their kit off, put their trunks on, came home, got changed a bit. And it didn't, you know, it was water off a duck's back, you know, it didn't make any difference to them whatsoever. But like, in this one scenario of me at this primary school, you've got me at the one end of the spectrum, like, sort of like extreme prude, you know, shyness levels that would, you know, make a nerd in a library go, oh my God, that's chronically shy, you know. And on the other hand, you've got the other extreme of the, you know, you've got kids running around. That's sort of like a perfect example of the human spectrum right there, you know. What's classed as fun might be miserable for somebody else. But at the same time, what's miserable for somebody else might be just a jolly old good bit of fun for another person, you know. And, you know, I can guarantee there was no sexual activity involved. In fact, you know, in all further instances of me requiring to be naked in public throughout my childhood, you know, be it in PE shower rooms at secondary school or high school, whatever you want to call it, or you know, going out with friends on a, you know, when you're sort of like coming into teenagers and somebody suggests skinny dipping or whatever, you know, and like, so, you know, some people are instantly loving the idea, others are like, you know, and I'd have been one of the, for all these episodes I can think of where I've been required by somebody random to, well not random, but the social thing is just to be naked for whatever reason. You know, I'm afraid no sex was involved anywhere. I can't report that anybody really showed any interest in having sex with me. Yeah, never mind. But anyway, the you know, the thing is, and it's just this human thing again, and you know, it made me think about the human condition, in that often societies can get entirely based on human personality in this way, in that if the person in charge is somebody like me who's just chronically shy when it comes to public nudity, for what, you know, I don't know why I have this condition. You know, I'm one of those people that doesn't even like urinals in toilets. I try and use an urinal in a toilet and it's like I can't go, there's some kind of physical thing that blocks up in my pipes, and I just, even if there's nobody else in the room, weirdly enough, you know, I just stand there and nothing happens, and I was like, I thought I needed a piss. I came to the loo because I thought I needed a piss. Why isn't it working? But then if I just then rush in, just go into the cubicle, close the door, in a sort of claustrophobic space now, it's like it all relaxes and, oh, I did need the loo. It's just for some reason, you know, I don't know if that's related to it. It could be. It could just be a sort of human personality of shyness. The other people, they can go in the, you know, in the toilets and, you know, legs wide apart, straight out front. And, you know, they've got crowds of people looking over their shoulders, you know. It's no, might even love it, you know. You know, I can't use urinals unless, like, I've got so much water in me that if I don't use the urinal, I'll probably piss myself anyway. But anyway, that's sort of, is that off topic? I don't know if that's off topic. I think it's the same thing, you know what I mean? The sense of shyness, and how, for some reason, I just seem to have been born shy. I don't seem to have any control over it, you know. I've tried to be more confident in my nudity and my urinal use, and I've made many attempts to, like, grow up, as the word, you know, or whatever, and be manly and all that, and it doesn't work. It's just something inherent in me is sort of like, I don't want to do that. But on the other hand, you've got these other people that are the complete opposite. They seem to have just been born with zero social inhibitions to their nudity, and, you know, they're fine with the toilets, and it's part of their manliness to take their position and dominate the urinal scene and blast away and have a good look at everybody else's while they're doing it, you know, probably hoping they're looking at theirs, and I don't know, who knows. Anyway, when I'm watching this video, I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, it could be, he could be right. Maybe there was something funny going on. You know, like all the commenters responding to him, and it's like, yeah, I wish you the best of luck in your hunt, you know, but I don't think nudity by itself is sort of like the same as sex. I don't think you can encounter nudity and then automatically assume negative connotations, because they seem to be two completely different things. Oh, not completely different, I mean, oh yeah, I mean, that's that whole thing about painting nudes versus pornography, you know what I mean? It's sort of like art, pornography, same thing, no they're not, you know, and it's sort of a similar thing really, nudity, sex, I mean, are they automatically associated? Is nudity just fun? You know what I mean? Can nudity just be fun? Can it just be liberating for those that find it fun? But yeah, this human condition, it's like you can have entire societies based on shy people, where rules come in where statues have to have olive leaves put on them, you know, the greatest artists of all time, Michelangelo, you know, or whatever, Leonardo da Vinci's works. It's, you know, they're artists. They have boobs and dicks in their pictures, you know. It's what they do. It's all about painting the human form, you know, the whole, you know, that bloke standing in a star shape, you know. That's, you know, you can't really be an artist unless you're like good at making a representation of the human body, and you can't really do that without nudity, you know what I mean? Yeah, all these olive leaves getting put on all the great pieces of art, you know, and art galleries are having to shuffle away all the pictures of nudes into the basement, you know, and pretend they don't exist, you know, because the prudes are coming, you know. And it all gets a bit tragic and a bit OTT, you know what I mean? But on the other hand, you know, if a big nudity lover gets into power and it's like suddenly goes the other way, and all of a sudden everybody, you know, all the shy people are being bullied into getting naked all the time, and you know, the humiliation levels increase, and you know, we start being asked to get naked in the most bizarre situations, you know, and you know, you get the nude Olympics on telly or something, and it's like, well, it's not something I particularly want to watch, you know. Or I suppose it depends who's competing, but you know what I mean. But, you know, it's the Greeks used to do the Olympics naked, you know. That's the gag there. Anyway, but there you go. You know, it could just be that this particular incidents that this bloke's encountered with the Scouts could have just been that the leader of the pack at the time was one of those people who just thinks nakedness is a good old laugh. And, you know, it says in the video that, you know, they were told that they were just going to be having some fun, you know, and for some people getting naked is just a bit of fun, it's a good laugh, you know. Another thing that piqued my interest about it is that while I'm chronically shy, and while I will always sort of like go, no, when people, you know, sort of like try and badger me into getting naked publicly, and why I will shy away from that, you know. Oh yeah, I've never liked orgies, you know. You know, I have had scenarios where, you know, I've been either invited to or situations that you might class as an orgy, and I thought they were rubbish, you know. It's like people make such a big deal out of it, and it's crap, you know. But anyway, that's a different. That's what I feel with crap, you know. Because anyway, that's just a different video. Anyway, so yeah, even though I'm like this sort of chronically shy person, I don't extrapolate that to mean I want to put olive leaves on things. You know, I don't want to cover up other people's nudity. I can understand that some people might consider that nudity is fun, because, you know, I do find nudity and fun, just not when I'm doing it, you know. If somebody else wants to get naked, yeah, I can have fun watching them get naked. I mean, it kind of goes without saying, doesn't it? But it doesn't mean I'm like perving on them. It's just like, you do what you want to do, and yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind looking at you naked. Well, it depends. Anyway, but you know what I mean. It's like they have this naked bike ride in our town every year, and you know, about 20 or 30 people all turn up, you know, completely stark naked on a public park and get on bicycles and go for a cycle round, and you know, anyone passing by is sort of like, ooh, look at that, you know, and it's all a bit of fun, really. I don't believe there's sort of like, you know, it's like nudist beaches, you know. You either go to them or you don't, you know. And I'm not trying to denigrate this guy's intuition that he thinks there's something dodgy going on with this scout group or whatever. I mean, I think the nudity is not necessarily irrelevant, but I think if you take any organisation from 30 years ago and you hunted through every single person that was involved in them, statistically, you're probably going to find yourself a sexual predator in there somewhere, you know. But whether they tend to occur whether there's nudity or not, don't they? It's I'm not entirely sure whether the nudity is the issue or whether the nudity was just a means for somebody to suspect, and then, you know. The second video, he's had lots of people responding, but there wasn't, nobody's sort of mentioning any sex yet, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, you know. Of course it's possible, you know. But, you know, from my experiences, and I'm just sharing his experiences, and it's sort of like made me think of my experiences. And as I say, you know, these experiences I've had in my life where I've sort of like unusually or usually or expectantly or unexpectedly been desired to be naked in public, even though I'm a chronically shy person and probably a deeply suspicious person. I'd probably be, in his situation, I'd probably be thinking, oh, somebody's probably having some sex, aren't they, you know. But I think society as a whole would benefit if we didn't swing between the two extremities of chronic demonisation of nudity, and on the other hand we shouldn't sort of like live in a world where we're under pressure to get nude when we don't want to. You know, it'd be nice if we didn't have to oscillate between nudity or not nudity in society as some kind of binary. You're at the beach or whatever and somebody wants to strip off and go into the sea and have a bit of skinny dipping, you know, on a public beach. I don't think that should be indecent exposure. I think indecent exposure should be something a bit more substantially threatening to society than somebody just wanting to strip off and have a bit of fun, you know. Anyway, yeah, so that's why that video piqued my interest. It's a topic that I've kind of had to think about all my life. Since this is the first video in this particular series of content, I haven't had anybody ask me any questions, you know, so I can't really do this section because it's the first video, but I want to do it because I want to have this be a section, if that makes sense. The first ever Ask Me Anything, you know, I've got to make something up, you know, I've got to pretend somebody's asked me something. Whatever it is, it's going to be disingenuous because nobody's actually asked me that question, and it's just like me rambling about a topic I want to talk about, you know. It would be nice if from this video, either from the epic or from this individual, if you know, if anybody does watch this video and they could just ask some random question. I don't give a shit what that question is. It can be surreal or hyper-philosophical or utterly mundane or outrageous or trollish or, well, trollish, you know. The wonderful thing about trolls is, you know, you ask them not to be trolls in the comments and they, you know, that's, you know, lighting a fire under their butt. They're going to be right on the... You ask them to write something, you know, because you need it for the content, and it's like, troll you, not going to write anything. So yeah, I mean, I don't really, you know, it's nice to get, you know, not have any trolls, but, you know, if you're bored, want a bit of a troll, just write some comment you think would be utterly outrageous, you know, knock yourself out. And you know, I'm not saying this for as my means to generate algorithmic, you know, attention or whatever, you know. That's not the intention of it. You know, the intention of it is for people to hopefully ask something that they, you know, want answered, that any other conventional method of asking for not information but thoughts about a topic probably wouldn't get answered by regular hoi polloi YouTubers or, you know, people they know or whatever, you know. I'm a liberal, you know. There's no topic under the sun that I'm like feel restricted to talk about, you know what I mean? Even if it's like, what's your favourite colour, you know, it's amazing how much you can waffle about that, you know, from an interesting point of view. But I don't want to go down that route for my, you know, my first video, because, you know, I'd waste probably the most common question that I'll get over the next however long the series lasts, either if it's just this episode and nobody says a bloody thing, or you know if I even get anybody watching it, or if I'm, you know, down in episode 2973, you know, with the gone through the peaks and the troughs and just got like 30 people left, and one of them's still going to be asking, what's your favourite colour? So yeah, I don't want to do that, you know, save that for another day. That's, put that in the bank, you know. So what, you know, what I'll talk about, you know, I'll pretend somebody's asked me today is, you know, what do I think about the current societal desire to get kids off of social media? You know, this is quite an interesting topic for somebody making a YouTube video. And so I suppose theoretically everybody who makes YouTube videos should have a quite cogent thought on this by this point in time, you know. I grew up when all this stuff was starting, and, you know, I've experienced it. I haven't experienced it as a kid, that's the thing, you know. When it all started going off, you know, the internet started getting going, I was probably about 23, something like that. 22, 23 maybe. So yeah, I don't have the experience of experiencing it as a child, but I have the experience of seeing it all progress from ground zero, as it were, the whole internet thing. And what I find interesting about this topic is that on YouTube, which is the social media that I have the most fun with, because I've always, you know, when I was asked to decide what A-levels to do, you know, I chose media studies because I thought media studies would be, you know, teaching you how to make films, and yeah, wonderful naivety, you know, and media studies was more about learning to be a critic than it was learning to be an artist, you know. Yeah, so I did that, and then I applied to, when I'd done my A-levels, got terrible results, you know, absolutely shite. I got 2 D's and a N, which meant nearly, you know, like a good nearly, is there? And so that my university options were very limited, and my dreams of going to a decent film productions course at college were fairly much dashed. And I didn't really want to go down any more media studies routes, because, you know, it's just learning to be a critic. I think most people are born critics. I don't think you need to learn to be a critic necessarily. You probably need to learn to be a good critic, but maybe not just a critic, you know, because everyone's a critic, aren't they? Anyway, so yeah, the film production sort of avenue vanished from my sights, and I went and did a history degree at a dumpy, you know, bottom of the barrel university or whatever. And that was nice. I liked history. That was like my second love in life. So, you know, that was still nice. But my dream ended, you know, when I was about 18 or 19. And then, of course, YouTube came along in the late zeros. Mid to late zeros. And, wow, awesome. Yeah, you can just sort of like have a stab at making stuff. And, you know, my content in those early years, most of it's still on there. I think I've only ever deleted a couple of videos, not because they were naughty, but because I just thought they were crap. You know, they might not have been, you know. You're always your own worst critic, aren't you? So, back in those days when YouTube was just starting, they had a limit, or they had a rule. When you signed up, you had to be at least 13 years old. You know, you weren't allowed to have officially you weren't allowed to have a YouTube account unless you were 13 years old. So, you know, people didn't make content for kids back then. All the content was for, like, adults, or, you know, late teenagers, whatever. Pretty much, you know, adult content. If you go and see a movie that's a 15, or, you know, whatever that equivalent is in America, I don't know. In UK, you used to have a 15 certificate for movies, and generally speaking, that was sort of like for late teenagers to adults, and it would have pretty much all content except nudity, or rather, strong nudity. The strong nudity or the outrageous gore. That would be R-rated or X-rated, or in the UK it's called an 18. And so that's what YouTube essentially was at the beginning. It was a sort of a late teenagers plus. So it's sort of like everything apart from outrageous nudity, and or what we would call hardcore nudity, I suppose nowadays, or excessive gore, I suppose. Realistic gore. That wasn't medical related. Oh, I don't. I've never been into. Well, I had a friend that used to be into gore films, but I was never really into gore films. He liked the more gore in a movie, the more he likes it. And I only liked the gore films that were funny gore films, like Brain Dead or Bad Taste. Anyway, that's a bit of a diversion there. I do apologise about that. So yeah, YouTube was, essentially what would be classed as that sort of like 15 bracket. It would be like, pretty much your content was aimed at an adult basically, but not with the like. No porn or massive gore and all that kind of stuff, And so that's how we all made our content. After a few years, it's quite obvious that like 10-year-olds were getting hold of the internet and coming onto YouTube because it was a fun place to be. And there was loads of accounts that were like 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and they sort of became their own market, as it were, and I never targeted that market, but it was evident that it was there, if that makes sense, It sort of led to YouTube twigging onto the idea that they wanted to try and create YouTube Kids and, corner the kids market, which from a business point of view, and from a reality point of view might as well, But of course, as soon as you involve kids in anything, it all becomes controversial. Starts becoming controversial, doesn't it? That's the problem with kids, generally speaking. It's not the kids, it's not the content, it's... But anyway, you know what I mean. You get kids involved in something, and all of a sudden, everything comes under more scrutiny. And all of a sudden, the YouTube algorithm was not promoting videos that wouldn't be suitable for kids. The primary content, when you upload a video, there's a box that says, is this content suitable for children? And if you tick no, your likelihood of getting in the search results was sort of, it's essentially a form of censorship, a sort of backdoor censorship, And it's like you can't have the word fuck in the title anymore. You can't have the word fuck in the content anymore. And the bullshit. And so, this coincided with wanting more advertising, and then because the advertisers want to advertise to kids, and then, you have content that's sort of like not designed for kids, but they're sticking the adverts for kids on it because, it's a robot just shoving adverts out everywhere, and then there's controversy, and it all gets a bit messy really. So I kind of stopped making content, not because I didn't want to make content anymore, but just because you felt the bullshit was becoming too aggressive, you know what I mean. And now that we've sort of like, we've gone the full circle now, and we're getting to the stage where we're saying again, well, why are the kids here, it's like, nothing against the kids are great, the content's great, but like, all the hairies are using it as an excuse to beat everybody up, and, making everything shitter, reducing your ability to have interesting, engaging content. Not that this probably is that, but you know what I mean. When there's this sort of new panic about kids on the internet, kids on social media, regarding, in the specific situation of YouTube, I'm actually for that, as much as I am a liberal-minded, whatever kind of person. At this point in time, I think it would be better if people could just, when they make a YouTube account, not have to worry about whether kids are watching it. I think that would be better for everybody, really, apart from the kids, of course. it's sort of like a regretful agreement. You know, I'm not agreeing because I'm joining in the panic of the youth or whatever. I mean, the kids are just copying us, aren't they? It's just like, you know. Anyway, but I am joining in with the idea just because, yeah, well, it might be a solution to enable us to have freer content again. Maybe I'm being naive. Maybe it's not an avenue to freer content. Maybe it's an avenue, you know, the first step in further censorship. You know, maybe it's the first nail in the coffin. I don't know. You know, if you just take it at face value, if the issue is just the kids, if the reason why we all have to make crap content is just because of the kids, and now we've decided that these people who have made, you know, complain that we have to make crap content for kids, then, you know, if they're now saying that actually no, that don't worry about that, we'll just take the kids off the media, you can go back to making decent content, fine. Yeah, I mean, that's something I can go along with. Yeah, hopefully something positive can come out of this, you know. I mean, it's a bit of a shame that all those sort of like 10 to 12-year-olds that made the site a bit more popular and interesting back in the day, in that it was just hilarious to see a 10-year-old on a site where they weren't allowed to be, you know. It was all part of the laugh, you know. But, you know, I don't know. Yeah, just sense of resignation, I suppose. You as you go through each wave of bullshit, you know, you have to try and adapt to whichever bullshit you're in at the moment. And yeah, I think if they got kids off social media somehow, then, well, I don't know about all the social medias, but in YouTube particularly, then I that would encourage me to make more videos, really, I suppose, because I could get back to making content where I didn't really give a shit if a kid was watching it or not, you know. So, yeah. Ask me something more interesting than that. There must be things out there that are more interesting to waffle about. And here we are, the welcome screen to Baldur's Gate 3. Now, I was hoping this was going to be a blind playthrough. Unfortunately, as is often the case when you try and record a game, it's taken about 520 runs to try and get the sound and other technical issues sorted out. So I've been through this, the first hour, including setup, probably about, I don't know, 453 times. So it's not going to be blind, at least for this first episode. All future episodes hopefully will be, assuming that everything is okay with this run, and this is the run we go with. But yeah, nice screen there, look. That's a nice place to start your adventure, really. Or end up, I don't know whether you're going to end up there. So let's get on with this. And yeah, the music kicks in. This music was very difficult to balance. Very difficult indeed. The music in this game, and most of the effects really, they're either like really, really quiet, you can barely hear them, or they're boomingly loud and it's like, and so when you're just talking at a sort of flat level pace the whole time, it's almost impossible to get it so that it's always got music, but at the same time it's not overriding my ramblings. Anyway, hopefully I've got all that sorted now. It's a nice little cave here. I think this is lovely, very evocative. Exactly the kind of cave you'd want to wander out of in a Dungeons and Dragons game. There we go. And so, new game. Oh no, not new game yet, I do apologise. I'll show you the options I've changed. So karmic dice I've turned off because I want an authentic dice roll experience. And this karmic dice says it balances things, and I don't want any balancing in my game really. And yeah, if the karmic dice is just covering up for a badly implemented dice algorithm, then I might come back to this. But at this moment in time, I'm going to ride the risky waves. And auto saves I've put down to 1. Excuse me, because in my previous experiences that a lot of games want you to have like 5 or 6 autosaves, and all that does is lumber up your system with lots of gigabytes of pointless data, which often leads to more crashes than if you don't have any autosaves. And the only real purpose of an autosave is if the game crashes. Because anyone who plays a D&D game, a computer PC game, then they should be fully aware that you're going to need to save all the time. That goes hand in hand with the genre, really. So you should be making your own saves and just relying on one of these for in case of a crash, really. Panning speed and edge panning. I've turned edge panning off, and because I like edge panning in games. Whether it'll be irritating in this one, whether it's good for this game, I don't know, but I've turned it on. I put it on slow though, and see how I get on with that. Keybinds, haven't changed anything there. Video. This might upset some graphic whores out there, and I do apologise to every single one, but I've turned off VSync, I've turned off anti-aliasing and fidelity FX sharpening. Because I'm not really a graphics whore, and I don't mind if I lose some finer details or a little bit of, what do they call it, tearing. Because I'm more interested in the game than the graphics. I apologise to people who get obsessed about those kinds of things. Frame rate was defaulted to 60. So I've left it at 60. I don't know whether to go higher or lower, or again see how it gets on. Custom, and then highs and ultras for all the other settings basically, and I've left bloom on. I don't know if bloom offends some people, and it seems to be one of those things you either love it or hate it. I haven't really got much experience with it, so this would be a good way for me to figure out which camp I sit in. And yeah, this is my current sound settings, and whether this will actually work this time or not, fingers crossed. My accessibility features, oh no, the interface, here we go, which will be my accessibility features, is that I've just turned all the text up. Turned the size of all the text up, because I'm really old now and I don't like trying to squint my eyes at tiny little bits of wording on the screen. And you see that this text is alright, I can cope with this, this is manageable, that's quite small, but computer games, no matter how big your monitor is, they'll always put text in it that's sort of like half the size of this. And you have to get your microscope out, well, not your microscope, your magnifying glass out to figure out what it's saying. And you'd hope there'd be one of these for all text, any written word in the game, whack it up in size. But I suppose that might upset things, but I've maximised all I can, and that's all that done. What other things were there? Oh, in gameplay, what was Oh yeah, flying creatures. This is a bit of a spoiler, I suppose. It's telling us we're going to be flying at some point and we'll need to follow flying creatures. And this is quite unusual for a D&D RPG computer game. And yeah, it's sort of a Larian thing. They've done a lot of flying in their previous non-D&D games. Most notably in Divinity 2, which weirdly enough is the one Divinity game that I didn't manage to get through due to technical difficulties, you know, like 15 years ago. So it got put on my back burner and I haven't ever got back to it really. What was the interface, or was it, are we up to accessibilities now? Oh yeah, and so my accessibilities are just the text thing again. It's the same thing, but we've got another spoiler here. Show sexual and violent cinematics. So it's telling us there's going to be sexual and violent cinematics, which is understandable because the Baldur's Gate series is all about the sex, and that's how it makes itself unique from the other D&D computer games, in that you've got the main plot and the story in the game you go through, but there's like this secondary element where you're supposed to romance NPCs, and they did that in Pathfinders as well, but it's not something I'm massively motivated by. Normally when those texts come up I just sort of say, nah, you're alright, I'll continue my quest. I think that's a bit of a distraction. But it might just be that I've never come across a NPC that's taken my interest, so I'll leave it on just in case, you never know. And show genitals. So we're going to have the option for showing genitals, presumably in the sex scenes or as my character. So I'm going to leave those on because that sounds fun, and that's kind of what makes the Baldur's Gate games unique from other D&D games. Right, so that's my options done. So new game, and I'm not going to go tactician because I'm one of those people who doesn't understand why people just want to watch their games. For me, the whole concept of a game is to play a game. And I know that sort of like computer games are blurring the lines between films and games, but I'll hang on in there and try and keep playing games, which means I want a challenge. And yeah, balanced is probably going to be too easy, that's my guess, that's the problem, but tactician will probably put on loads of HP bloat and nonsense that's not playing by the rules, and I also want to play by the rules. So we don't want Iron Man mode or anything, so custom. Standard rule set, so yeah, that's hopefully playing by the rules. Enemy aggression. Now tactician here sounds the best. Enemies will attack ruthlessly and efficiently. And if an enemy is not attacking ruthlessly and efficiency, then what's the point of them being there? I mean, that goes without saying, really. But however, here for tactician it says hostile characters will be stronger and harder to kill, which sounds like HP bloat. If it's not, I don't know. I could Google these to find out, but I'm so desperate to avoid spoilers. I've avoided spoilers for 2 years now. But I've been waiting to upgrade my rig, and so I've had to wait 2 years, and I've avoided all the spoilers, all the news reports, articles, forum posts, you know, looking up questions, anything really. Even if people start talking about it, I just stick my fingers in my ears, you know. Buried my head in the sand. So I could look this up, but I don't want to at this point in time. So keep enemies and allies alike at the same level of strength. So hopefully that's not level scaling, and hopefully that's just as it should be. Enemy loadouts, again tactician, it says enemies will employ advanced spells and items. Well, I don't want a level 1 wizard firing fireballs at me. I'm hoping that a level 1 wizard would use the level 1 spells at me, so I'm a bit tentative in going tactician there because that sounds like breaking the rules. Additional combat mechanics. It says tacticians, some encounters become more complex and difficult. And I don't know what, if this means improved AI, I'm happy to go for it. But if it means waves, I don't like waves. You've just defeated the enemies, and then it just sends out the exact same bunch of enemies a second time, and you think, well, I've just proved I can kill them, now I've got to do it all over again with half my health points. And I don't like that, and I'm worried, because if I go tactician, because I do want complex AI, if that's what that's saying. But balance, it says the default encounter complexity for Baldur's Gate 3. So that's what they've... Oh, I don't know, this is difficult, isn't it? I'm going to leave that on balanced for now, and if it is too easy, come back to that, I suppose. That's core rules, that's good. And I'm going to have enemy critical hits on, because of course. Why wouldn't you? And yeah, I'm going to take the 1s and the 20s. You know, I'm going to take them on the chin. Because that's core rules. And disabled free first strikes, no death saving throws, and 1 thing per rest. No 4 heals on a short rest. Trading modifier, that's something new I haven't seen in a computer game like this before. And surely, you know, this would be an incredible way to completely butcher the game's balance, really. Because it's defaulted to 2.5, which is good, but if you put it all the way down here, then the trader's buying stuff off you at the same price you buy it back, so they wouldn't exist as a business. And if you put it all the way here, you'd never be able to afford anything. You know, you'd just be able to afford a +1 sword at the end of the game. So I'll go with that, really. Default. Multi-class thing, I'm going to leave this on. I've never multi-classed in any D&D computer game ever, and you know, I've never felt the need to, and I enjoy maximising my class to get everything the class can do. I'm aware that it doesn't necessarily enable the best min-maxing of the game, but I've never struggled to get through a game without it. However, this game might be different. I might get tempted to multi-class in this, so I will leave it on just in case. And then there's all these dice roll things. They're all unchecked. I can't remember what they were on default now, but there we go. So that's everything, isn't it? We can start the game. Let's get into the first cutscene. Or is it the second cutscene? Oh, I don't know. Here we go, this is all reminiscent of the Aliens films. Where the aliens put face huggers on their cocooned victims. And in this game, it's the same kind of thing, but you get an eye hugger rather than a face hugger. And there we go, a bit of additional sound effects for you. And this is going to be my playable character, I assume. And there we go. Right, so I'm going to be, got a choice of a male or female here. I'm going to be playing a male. I don't always play males, sometimes I'll play females. I used to enjoy playing a female in Neverwinter Nights for some reason, I don't know why. But I suppose it depends what character models they have, plays a big part. I suppose I fancied one of the Neverwinter Nights character models for the ladies. So yeah, bloke for this one. And going to go with a custom character. I never go with pre-made characters. I always choose my own. I mean, that's half the fun really. I don't know how people can play an RPG and then not create a character, but each to their own. Not going to get angry at them for it. It just seems to me to be a bit weird. Maybe if it's their first one ever, I don't know, but they're not going to learn if they do that. Anyway, so I've had a look through all of these, and the one that's going to suit my character is going to be a half-elf. There he is. And the reason I've gone for a half-elf is because in 5e, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, they're really big on light and dark. So you get disadvantages fighting in the dark. But a half-elf has the all-important dark vision, while maintaining a movement speed of 9. But most importantly, it has this Fey ancestry. So my character is going to be really crap at sort of mind-affecting saving throws. And as we saw from the intro there, mind flayers are probably going to play a part in this game. Maybe quite a big part, I don't know. And they're going to be messing with my mind. So I need all the help I can get, being as I'm not going to have the stats to help me. So Fey ancestry, I get advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and I can't be put to magical sleep. That'll be a great help. And he has all the weapons and stuff. So if I went with a human, I don't get the dark vision, I don't get the Fey ancestry. So there we go. And the thing that really sold me to the half-elf was the wood half-elf, which absolutely perfectly fits the character I'm intending to play. I'm going to be playing somebody who relies on movement speed a lot. And the wood half-elf gets the additional movement speed. It says 1.5 there. I'll take all I can get. And my class is going to be Barbarian. When I first loaded this up, I thought, class Barbarian, how did it know? Good heavens, Google AI is getting a bit too advanced for its own good there, isn't it? Knowing that before I'd even chosen, but of course it's just in alphabetical order, and I just happen to want to play a Barbarian in this game. And the reason is, prior to 5th edition, I never played Barbarians. I'd sometimes have them in sort of like games where you could create your entire party, but I wasn't enamoured by them. But I've become enamoured by them from the 5th edition experiences I've had in Solasta. I've had an awful lot of fun with Barbarians in Solasta, so I'm going to see how they fare in this game. And Barbarians rely on movement speed and having lots of hit points. So they rush around the battlefield, slapping things about, not having to worry too much about attacks of opportunity because they've got a huge health pool. And yeah, good for rushing up to mages hiding in corners and all that kind of thing. And they have this unarmoured defence, so instead of lugging around armour, my constitution and my dexterity goes towards my armour class rather than just my dexterity. So by pumping constitution, which is going to be his primary skill attribute, you're also pumping your armour class. So that's a 2 for 1, that's a win-win in my book. And background, A barbarian can go with quite a lot of these. You could have a barbarian charlatan, a barbarian criminal, a barbarian entertainer, and a barbarian folk hero. You know, folk hero. That would suit the Baldur's Gate vibe, where it always turns out you're in some way the special one. You know, you've got some god hiding in you or something or other. You know, so. But animal handling won't be useful to me. But so Outlander, you know, pretty much the obvious one for a barbarian is going to be my choice for athletics, because he's going to be good at running. That's his thing. And so we go on to abilities, and this bit here, it seems we can swap them around. I didn't realise this until very recently, and yeah, but that all looks kind of. So I get +2, one plus 2, and 1 plus 1. This is slightly confusing me at this point in time, because I thought you had to have them specific to your race. I didn't know you could put them anywhere. And yeah, I can't put them both into the same one, but I can put them anywhere how I like within that. So yeah, it's started me off with, what did it start me off? There is the default, and I'll start off down here, because my fella's not going to be very charismatic. He's a barbarian. He spends most of his time in the wild. He runs around a lot. He's a very sweaty person. Personal hygiene isn't his main priority. So, and he doesn't talk to people too much, apart from, you know, circle round that pig so I can go round the other side and we can catch it for dinner, that kind of stuff, really. Maybe they'll tell stories round the campfire, but he's not the main storyteller. Wisdom and intelligence, they're just going to be average. Pure, normal, average. He spent too much time making sure he's good at hunting to be bothered with matters of the mind. And it started us off with 1 each here, all on odd numbers, because I assume it's going to give you a +1 at some point, and that's when it's expecting you to decide what you want to focus in. But I already know what I want to focus in, and I don't need that much strength, to be honest. I want to pump up the dexterity and constitution, but I don't want strength to go below 16. So if I go like that, and it's like, no, that's too low. So I want to get strength up to 18 at some point in the game, but in the early stages 16 is fine. And so giving these two just 1 more point each, that's given me an armour class of 5 to start with instead of 3, which will be a great help. If he gets a shield in the early game, that'd be the equivalent of running around in half plate, and he's not wearing anything, so that's what I want, really. And that's that for that bit. Now, yeah, too buff, too skinny. I thought there'd be a slider here or something, but it seems you've got a choice of too buff. He doesn't look very athletic. He looks like he's well-armed, well-strong, but not necessarily somebody who could do 1500 metres at a good pace. But this guy, yeah, he looks like he could do the 1500 metres, but he doesn't really look like he could wield a two-handed axe once he got there, so ideally I'd have wanted something sort of like halfway between those two. Never mind, just what it is. And the choice of voices, they all sound fairly similar, but I've gone for the third one because it seems to be the deepest one. And don't care, I mean that face seems fine, don't need to change that. Blush tone, that seems fine, don't need to change that. Maturity, I wanted him to, you know, not look too youthful and not look too old. I wanted him to be sort of like, you know, he's been out hunting with the gang, you know, maybe 5 or 10 years. He's not the chief, but you know, he's got a bit of experience. He's not just gonna you know, go blindly into unusual circumstances without a bit of course knowledge. But that doesn't seem to, that slider doesn't seem to change much, and freckles didn't change much, so I'm not really going to bother with them. And yeah, genitals, this is interesting, this is exciting, this is what Baldur's Gate's all about, so let's hide his clothes. And yeah, we can have a look at his genitals, how about that, swirling round there. Have a look at his bum, he's got a ponytail, I didn't realise that. There we go. Get all the angles we can, and yeah, so I'm not sure when the game will require him to be naked, but maybe that's just for cutscenes. But I had a look at all the penises, and yeah, they all seem to be much of a muchness, really. He's not going to be somebody who's had surgery, so that's that out. And yeah, I'll just go with the default, really. I can't really see it. Let's put his clothes back on there. Body art, he's not going to have any body art, can't be bothered. The golden eyes do look good, I have to admit. That does look really nice. However, I'm going to be a barbarian, and his thing's going to be raging and, you know, getting into a blood red rage. So I'm going to give him red eyes if that ever comes into play, that we get a close-up of his eyes. Hopefully he'll be raging at that point as well, and it'll work even better. And then we go to makeup. That's all, yeah, doesn't. And yeah, just this unkempt sort of mess that he's currently rocking is pretty much what I was going to go for, and it's the default. So I don't think this fella's going to have any particular, you know, hairstyle. He's going to just get it all shaved off every now and again and then grow it back. And when it does grow back, he's not going to be too bothered about it. I didn't realise I had a ponytail, even that's a bit too excessive, really. You know, he doesn't want that getting snagged on anything when he's out and about. So there we go, that's, stop spinning around, there we go. And facial hair. I mean, to go with the hair, he should sort of like have equivalent scruffy beard, but none of the beards really, they look quite horrible, really. None of them really fitted what I was imagining for the character, so I'm just going to stick with the shaved there. He's so hardcore, he shaves with his great axe, you see. There we go. And that's all done. So we can proceed now and give him a name. You can spend hours deciding on a name for a character, and it is a lot of fun deciding on the name for a character. But recently I've been going for floral inspiration, and the natural world is great for quickly thinking of a name for a character. So barbarians I've been calling Bramble, which is a good, for a male barbarian, that's a good male sounding name. And it's also a wild plant, a wild fruit. It grows underground in these great long tendrils of roots, and then just pokes up whenever it's ready, wherever it feels like, and gets really big really quick and forms a hedge if there's lots of it. And then fruits come out, and if you pick the fruits, you know, you'll get scraped by all the massive thorns on the stalks. So it's sort of like tempting you in with all these lovely fruits, but it's all covered in all the most horrible nasty thorns. You get scraping, you know, maybe even some blood dribbling out of you. You know, that's the price you pay for their fruits, you know. And yeah, you leave your garden wild for a year, and you know, around where I live, loads of bramble will just start overgrowing everything. And so that's ideal, really, for the old barbaric wild man. So proceed there. Now this is a new thing. This is going to be unique to this particular game. Never seen this before in any other game. I have no idea what it wants, what the Guardian is going to be. Even in the she doesn't appear in the opening segment of the game, so I don't know really. So I'm just channeling Pathfinder Kingmaker here, and they had a halfling that was narrating your story. So if it's anything like that, I'll just go with that. Then I kind of know where I am. And this lady here, she's stealthy and sociable. So I'm stealthy, which matches me, but I'm going to be unsociable, and if it's a player character, she can be the sociable one. There we go, and don't need to change it. What they've delivered me here is pretty much acceptable to me, so I don't need to change anything, so I shall venture forth. Another cutscene. And these octopus things, they are Dungeons and Dragons version of a Cthulhu monster. They're called a mind flayer. Have I said that already? I don't know. Ah, the tentacles of power. And what a superpower that is. Get out of that. Teleportation tentacles. And that is a fantastic design for a ship. That is really good. I like that. And there's the dragons part of the Dungeons and Dragons. The teleportation tentacles obviously don't work against the dragons though. Oh, that's gotta hurt. Right, and that's that cutscene, and now we go to the crash landing. And I assume this lady here is going to be our companion at some point. This half-orc lady, half-orc, I think she's going to be a martial type, that's my guess. These games often give you a martial type as your first companion, because so many people will pick a wizard. It'll be very difficult to balance early combat around just one wizard on their own. And that's a lot of imps. You can lock your... Oh, I didn't get time to read that tooltip. Your spells will react with the environment. Oh no, I didn't get time to read that one. That is one advantage of upgrading your rig. You don't get very long loading screens, but of course I can't read the tooltips now. That's a trade-off I'm happy with. And there I am. Yep. Because I've got the screen slidering on, it zoomed me over here because I put the mouse over here during the cutscene.
What to do?
Let's go back there. Journal updated. Right. I'm going to be playing as this character, not as me. So if you get frustrated by me not doing something, it's probably because this character wouldn't do it. But anyway, he's just come out of his pod. He's completely bewildered. He doesn't have a clue what's going on. He's looking around in himself thinking, Jesus Christ almighty, I am completely flummoxed. So he's just going to stand there and survey the scene for a bit, get his bearings. Coincidentally, that does that does assist what I want to do at this point in time, because let's have a look at these buttons. There's my journal. Find a way off the Nautiloid. We've been abducted by mind flayers and infected with some kind of parasite. We need to find a way off this ship. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Inspiration. This is a very Larian thing. Haven't seen this before in any other D&D game. And if I do athletic things, because that's my Outlander background, or survival things, I get inspiration points which I can use to improve my dice rolls. Or re-roll my dice rolls. Not too bothered about re-rolling my dice rolls, but yeah, I'm willing to play along. If I get a 1 or whatever, might be useful. No dialogues yet, tutorials. There's the map, quest markers and all that. There's no chests in this list that I can see. In Solasta, you go into the map a lot because that's where it tells you where all the treasure chests are. I might use this one at some point, see how it goes. And let's have a look at my inventory. So stats. Yeah, athletics really good, stealth really good, perception and survival okay, sleight of hand and acrobatics okay, and absolutely rubbish in all the thought and intelligence based stuff. I probably would have liked to have some points in nature, truth be told, because he does know his flora and fauna, but that's we just couldn't really find anything useful for that in the character creation rather. And here we go, movement speed. This is going to be his most important stat. He's got 11. So it's rounded up my 1.5 bonus to 2. Fantastic, even better. So he's going to be running across the screen whenever possible, hopefully. And that's all that. Now this bit here I'm a bit confused about, because you can swap between clothings. And like, so he's not wearing both of those, like he's not wearing 2 sets of boots, and he's not wearing 2 overalls. I mean, this is just peasant attire, he wouldn't wear this anyway. This is his barbarian get-up. But I realised that it's this bit here, you can wear a spare set of clothing, or have it like in a quick bar or something. And I can't imagine this is going to work in combat. I mean, you wouldn't like say to your enemy, just hold on a minute, stop bashing me for a moment, I'm just going to, you know, change clothes for a minute, you know, I'm in the wrong clothes, and they're like, okay, fine, get on with it. But it might work in combat, I don't know. So I'm guessing maybe it's for when you're in one of the cities and some deranged official wants you to wear nice clothes in certain buildings or something, I don't know. But anyway, that's what he's going to wear. The underwear, that's fun. I think that's hilarious. That is a bit of realism. People always joke that, you know, why don't characters have underwear in games? And this one's given us the underwear. And if you click on it to examine it, this is hilarious. It's a French horn. I love it. I'm assuming that's a French horn, and that's the joke, because it doesn't look like a pair of underpants, but it does look like a French horn. And so yeah, let's take those off and have a look at our fella. He does indeed go nude in there, and he's striking a manly pose. There we go, he's all set for the artist's easel there. And looking like the veritable Greek god that some artists might paint him as when he's finished his adventure. But yeah, so they've kept the axe on board. He's holding the axe up by the power of his bum cheeks there. He's honed and trained his bum cheeks for many years, to the point where he can now carry a great axe between them. Now that should be an Olympic sport, really. How far can you run with a great axe wedged between your bum cheeks? Anyway, I could keep him naked, because I'm playing a barbarian and he's got unarmoured defence. Effectively, his skin is his armour. So I don't need to wear clothes. However, I'm playing the character, not me. I'm not doing a meme run. And this fella here is experienced. He's seen himself and other barbarians try and be naked in the wild, and it doesn't tend to work out too good for them. You know, when they're jumping over the bramble bushes, the last thing they want is for their dangly bits to get snagged on a big thorn. It's not nice. And as you can see, this particular environment has lots of sharp bits and lots of fire going on, and his first thought is going to be, no, I think I do want my crown jewels to be protected in this particular circumstance. So, yeah, no, there's... Put them clothes back on as quick as possible, I think. Right, all these buttons here are his actions, what he can do. I suppose we'll learn about those as we come across them. And he's been standing here for a while now, he's ready to go. And he's getting a bit worried that there's all this fire, it might blow up at any minute and he ought to do something. But me as a player, I noticed there's a turn-based option, which effectively freezes time. I could have done all that in frozen time and not wasted any in-game time at all. Now, I don't know what the point of turn-based outside of combat is. That's something I might learn at some point, but if I ever want to freeze time, if time is important, I can press this button and have a look around my inventory and UI and probably do things without wasting time. But anyway, back to real time. There's a little timer there. You can't go straight back into turn-based mode. That must be important for a reason. Let's start looking around.
Might still be stuck inside if we hadn't been attacked.
Now, I don't think there's anybody left
Someone else got out.
in any of these pods,
Press ahead.
but I will just double check.
Might be other survivors. Not everyone made it out alive. Let's have a look. Wonder who was inside.
Right, and we've got a dead mind flayer here, so we'll loot them of some amethyst.
Dead.
It's a very cheap gem. It's a common starter gem. And then we'll have a look in this bit here, because this is amusing, this is. And this is probably going to be a theme of the game, is my guess. Being as Baldur's Gate is the sexualised D&D, and we've got a sort of penis-shaped bit of room here. A little alcove shaped like a penis. So, is it tempting us to look in there for something? But no, there doesn't seem to be anything in there. It was just probably an amusing Easter eggy type thing. Anyway, there's this trailing footpath that goes behind him, so let's have a look around here. Right, we can interact with these brine bulbs, which provide light. Now, me as a player, I'd want to bash them to find out what bashing them does, because they are bashable, and for no other reason. However, my character is quite happy that there's light in this environment, and he's a bit suspicious of what might happen if he bashes that. And he's got nothing against the light, so there's no reason for him to bash them, so he's not going to. And nothing in that pod either. And we come up to a table here, and this is where we learn that the Alt button comes in useful, because there's actually some onyx on there that you probably wouldn't notice if you didn't press the Alt button.
If I do.
And what doesn't come up in the Alt button, but is also there, is this rune stone. I'm probably going to miss loads of stuff in this game. We'll see how it goes. There we go.
Visions project into your mind. A nautiloid hurtling through the plains, resplendent with psionic energy.
Now, for my character, this is complete word salad. A bunch of weird words he hasn't really heard much before, and he's like, what? So he's going to listen again.
Visions project into your mind. A nautiloid hurtling through the plains, resplendent with psionic energy.
And it's like, oh, I get it. I'm envisaging that cutscene. So my character now has memories of what we've seen. We've got some fire in here. I have walked on fire in some previous episodes. Not episodes, previous attempts to get the first episode out. And yeah, I lost some health points. That would have been amusing, but I know now. So, and there's a chest here. Now, that thing that it just read out, that was word salad. And an issue I have with graphics, as graphics improve, and this has been the case, you know, going on for many years, not just recently, but the better graphics get, the more the graphics themselves sort of become a graphics salad, where they're so good that you can't really see where you're supposed to be walking or looking at. And it'd be very easy just to come up here, think, oh, there's nothing here, and then wander off back again. Completely not realising that, you know, in this particular area here, this section of grey-red art is distinct from the other grey-red art around it. You have to be standing right next to get the light on it to see it's even an object, a 3D object. And then you could highlight to get this to indicate there's something there. Or you could just click on it because you're clicking on everything. And yeah, that's a chest with some gold in it. And yeah, I mean, would I rather have crappy graphics and the ability to know exactly where I'm supposed to be going? Or would I rather have good graphics and be constantly confused about where I'm supposed to be going? I mean, the graphics probably win, don't they? I mean, in the long run, I just wish there was a way that there was the best of both worlds, really. Have I reached the bottom yet? No, I haven't. There we go. So that's that bit done. We've done the Mind Flayer body. We'll come up here because there's another chest hidden in the environment there. More gold and a bronze goblet. How exciting! Barbarians do like a goblet for swilling their booze from. And see, can't walk to there. It's sort of like your eyes have to quickly adapt to the reds and the greys, and oh, there's a gap there. But it suggests I can get up there, so this is probably a bit of verticality. Learn how to jump here. So this button here is the jump button. And there's some fire here. It looks like you can walk around it, but you can't. Oh dear, don't walk on it. And that's the problem, you see. You think you can walk around it, but you can't, then you walk on it. And let's jump over there. And we've now lost.
There
we go.
Not as bad as it could have.
And you'd think there'd be something round here. That looks like you can click on it, mate. You know, it's what am I? Is there some verticality I can interact with here? There's this thing, but I can interact with that downstairs. No, this is just somewhere to practice with your jumping, I suppose. So let's jump back. Yeah. And we can also practice with this thing called dip here, which is a very Larian thing. Let's interact with our environment. Dip our weapon in the fire, and we've now got a flaming sword, a flaming axe rather. That's nice, isn't it? And that likely stays active for a certain amount of time or rounds in combat, I don't know. But, putting it back in your backpack turns it off. Oh, it's gone already. Now how do I... Oh, he just automatically puts his axe away. You just have to wait a minute. There we go. So let's go back down here. And I think that's all for the sort of surroundings. Now we've got this thing, the nursery, which is destructible and interactable. I've interacted with it a billion times, and it has a dice roll here. What do they call them? A skill check, I suppose. And I've passed and failed it loads of times. Whichever way it goes this time, it doesn't matter. It's not very important. Doesn't do anything majorly of any relevance. So there we go.
This is the pool that thing came from. The parasite now writhing behind your eye.
And here, me as a player, I'm tempted to reach in just to find out what this button does. However, my character wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. He's had lots of experience in the wild where sticking your hand in things can get very messy very quickly. So he's like, no, I don't recognise what's going on here, so I'm not sticking my hand in that. But he will investigate, look a bit closer. Oh, and he does pass his roll this time. That's
The casing is fragile. The slightest touch could cause it to crumble.
So that's probably what happens when you reach in. It just breaks. Anyway, we're not going to do that because he's, as I said. However, what the character will do, because he's a barbarian, he's a bit raged up at the moment, he's not very happy. He's just had one of these things stuck in his eye. His first thought is to kick the crap out of it, so that's what he's going to do. And kablooey. It's always 3 hit points of damage when he does that, I've discovered that. And I'm still disappointed you don't get anything out of it, not even one little squidgy eye thing. It must have been booby trapped, you know. So, yeah, he's no longer raged anymore, though. He's got his, he's released all his tension and anger at the thing that got shoved in his eye. And he can get on. But he's lost 3 hit points, but I discovered that this thing just puts them all back anyway. I don't know if we'll get these all through the game. It seems a bit cheaty to me. But maybe it's just for the first area or something, you know, so that they don't have players quitting because they're leaving with 1 hit point, having walked into the fire and blown that thing up, and I don't know, all the other ways this area can probably ruin your hit point pool. Right, and yeah, this is it. This is the end of this particular area, the sphincter. And what an exciting place to have a cliffhanger, I think, you know. Join me next time when we crawl through the sphincter. Can't get any better than that, can you? Anyway, there we go. All that's left to do now is to save the game and get out of here.